Now, most of us are already familiar with 2 Timothy, the second chapter, verse 15, which reads, "Study to show thyself approved unto the Most High, unto Yahuwah. Study to show thyself approved unto Yahuwah, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." Study to show yourself approved unto the Most High, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Now, as we are studying to show ourselves approved, the study leads us somewhere. Yeah, it leads us into a deeper understanding of the Most High. It directs us, guides us onto and along the path of the Most High. But here's something else that happens. We get to the place where we have to look at ourselves. We literally have to look at who we are. And so that's where 2 Corinthians, the 13th chapter, verse 5, as well as Galatians, the 6th chapter, verses 3 through 4, come into play. 2 Corinthians 13:5 states, "Examine yourselves." Examine yourselves, plural, but examine yourself individually, whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Prove your own self. But you first start by examining yourself. Galatians 6:3 through 4. "But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another. But let each one examine his own work. Study yourself." Now, why is that important? When we study ourselves, we end up having to face the truth of who we are, what's in us, what's plaguing us, where we are along the paths of our journeys, if we're doing things the right way, according to Yahuwah's will, according to Yahuwah's word, or if we're faltering, if we're falling away. We as we examine ourselves, we end up having to really look at ourselves. The scriptures become a mirror that shows us what's going on with us. If you want to know what's up with you, look at you. Even I tell myself this, and I'm saying it to myself right now, look at yourself through the scriptures. And this is really more of a command. Study yourself. Examine yourself. And though what I've read comes from what we call the renewed covenant, okay, that some call the New Testament, this principle was actually applied over in the Old Testament, as we call it, particularly in the book of Psalms, where King David asked the Most High to create in him a clean heart and to renew within him a right spirit. Psalm 51:10 in particular, "Create in me, O Yahuwah, create in me a clean heart, O Yahuwah, and renew a right spirit within me." Well, how did David even know that he needed a clean heart and that he needed the right spirit within himself? It seems to me he had to examine himself. The brother had to study what he was doing, how he was thinking, where his current path at that moment was seemingly leading him, all based on what he knew of Yahuwah, of what the Most High mandates, dictates of us, expects of us. He had to examine himself, and so do we. Why is that important right now? It's important right now because we have to present ourselves before the Most High perfect, meaning set apart, meaning sanctified, meaning holy. All these different words, some of them being paganized terminology, but I think we know where we're trying to go with what I'm saying here. We have to present ourselves unto Yahuwah according to what Yahuwah expects of us. So in order to do that, we have to study ourselves. We have to be honest about what's going on with us. We have to be honest about how we're dealing with people, with Yahuwah's people in particular. We have to be honest about how we are regarding our brothers and our sisters. We have to be honest about how we are regarding ourselves. We have to be honest about how we're using this temple, watch this, and how we are even allowing other spirits to enter this temple and use this temple. We have to study ourselves. I just went where I'm really trying to go, which is allowing other spirits to use this temple. Right now, because there's so much in this world that is influencing our minds, that's getting into us via our eye gates, our ear gates, perhaps even through smell, through taste, the food and so forth. There's so much that if we're not in Yahuwah, if we're not studying ourselves, we won't be sensitive to these things. We will be very highly desensitized to these things, and we will allow these things to operate within us. YouTube, TV, radio, music, this stuff now is so sexually charged. It is so perverted. It's about incest. It's about rape. It's about adultery. It's about idolatry. It's about deception. It's all about the first part of John 10:10, killing, stealing, and destroying. And if we don't study ourselves, we're going to end up working for the enemy, in some cases unbeknownst to us, at least initially. Because in failing to study ourselves, we end up agreeing to behaviors based on our agreement with certain mindsets that develop and then evolve as a result of us allowing these other spirits to enter into us, again, through one gate or the other, in some way or the other. Create in me, O Yahuwah, a clean heart, and renew within me a right spirit. That's an honest prayer. That's an honest plea based on an honest examination of one's life. That's a request, a prayer built within a confession, and a confession built within that prayer. Old boy David knew that he had some stuff that was off center with him. He knew he had some stuff messed up within him that caused him to act antithetically to the way that the Most High, Yahuwah, had established things. We have to do the same thing. I was thinking after listening to a presentation tonight about how even I myself, and I think I'm just relaxed and try to get a little personal with this one. I work in the education industry, and I have worked in the education industry for a number of years. As you know, education is female dominated, female dominant, let's put it that way. And you've got females in some key roles, some key quote unquote decision-making roles. Oftentimes, many of these females are physically attractive. And oftentimes these females know that they are physically attractive. And they have, in some cases, had years to practice their seduction game. They have had years, in many cases, to practice it. Some of them are new to their allure, their power to seduce, but yet they're practicing it. And I have found over the course of time that as a man, as a black man, first and foremost, being in the education industry, there are typically two things that are expected of what this society calls a black man in education. We are either expected to be effeminate or we are expected to be the whoremongers. We're trying to stick every female that moves. Or from that, again, we are effeminate on the other end of that. I, praise the Most High, am attempting to be balanced in being rooted in the Ruach of the Most High. I'm trying to stay in the Word. I'm not trying to reflect the world. So even though I see some of these seemingly physically attractive females, the Most High also allows me to see oftentimes the very unattractive spirits within and behind these physically attractive females. So in other words, I see the game that's being attempted. I hear the tone in their voices as they present certain things. I sense the attempts to manipulate, even if it's a well-constructed attempt to manipulate. The Most High, praise you, Abba Yahuwah. You allow me to see it, and He always gives me a defense for it. And what I have found, and this still ties to having to study oneself and even just studying others, but being guarded to this stuff. What I have found is that many of these females with this allure, with this practiced skill of seduction, I can't even get the word out right now, with this practiced skill of seduction, when they come across a brother like myself who is trying to stay balanced, they are, it appears, somewhat attracted to it, and I think it's because they see it as a challenge. But it also pisses them off. It angers them because they're trying to crack it. They're trying to defeat what challenges them, but yet they can't defeat what the Most High is protecting. They can't defeat who and what is in the guard, in the hand of the Most High. So sometimes they try to lash out. Other times they go really deep into the seduction. I mean, where they end up breaking all type of HR protocols with some of their behaviors, the touching, not even suggestive language. I mean, just outright. I mean, just throwing it at you. I have to, every day, study myself to make sure I don't get caught up in what the enemy presents to me. Because the enemy can easily try to take a man's mind and say, brother, you know you can hit that. Brother, you know you can have that. Yeah, she's married, but her husband's not around. And, you know her husband, and he seems cool with you. So she's allowing you to do this, so, she ain't gonna tell him. You can do whatever, and it'll be all good, and you can still smile in his face when he's around, and you know what I'm saying? Because none of this is new. None of this is new. These are all old games. Nothing's new. So everything that the enemy tries to plant in my mind is old stuff that's been done for eons. But the outcomes of this stuff that the enemy tries to plant in my mind, the outcomes are old also. The outcomes go back to John 10 and 10. It's stealing, it's killing, and destroying. And if the destruction doesn't occur immediately, it will happen soon thereafter. Even if you don't get a sense of the destruction in this life as you're in the flesh at current, you're going to get it in the after. I have to study myself to make sure that I don't lash out at people who are trying to entrap me. I have to study myself to make sure I don't get caught up in sexual enticements. I have to study myself to make sure I don't let my guard down to such a degree that the enemy is able to slip in and slide in one way or the other. I have to study myself to make sure I don't get high-minded about the skills that the Most High has given me that are technically to be used to build his kingdom. I have to make sure I don't take personal ownership of those skills. I have to make sure that other resources that the Most High has given me, money, influence, time, and other talents, again, are all used for the betterment of his kingdom, to reach his people. Even as I do these YouTube videos, whether they're viewed by 1 or 100 million, I have to be mindful that I don't get in the way, that I'm not in love with myself or with my own voice. No, I have to be mindful that I'm caught up in the Ruach and allowing the Ruach to speak through me to his people in the way that he desires. Knowing that it's not about likes and subscriptions and numbers and all of that. It's about the message, the Ruach within the message, going forward and reaching whom it's to reach at the time it's supposed to reach them in the way that it's supposed to reach them, even if the one that's supposed to be reached is me. So we have to study ourselves. As we study the word, we have to study ourselves, because even in studying the word to show ourselves approved, we have to make sure that we ourselves are not in our own way in terms of our understanding of the word of the Most High. We have to study ourselves and be honest with the Most High about what our study of self reveals, so that we can get these spirits that are not of the Most High out of us. And we have to do it by confessing them. If you know you're dealing with homosexuality, you got to deal with that. You got to call it out. If you know you're dealing with drug addiction, you got to call that out. If you know you're dealing with lust, you got to call that out. If you know that you're dealing with any manner of perversion, whatever that is, bestiality, whatever, you got to call that crap out. If you know that drinking, that alcohol is enticing to you and it's something that causes your downfall, you got to call that out, because that's a stumbling block for you. That's a tripping point. If you know that shopping, going out to shop for shoes, is a tripping point for you, because you'll spend half your salary or your entire paycheck on sets of shoes, you got to call that out, because that's a spirit behind that. If you know that gossiping and lying are things that you do, yet you recognize that these are things that the Most High does not embrace, you got to call that out. And the only way you can recognize it is by studying yourself. The only way you can get to the place of calling these things out is by first studying yourself, in order to be honest with yourself, to call them out. We are in a day and time right now where we have to be blatantly 100% honest about who we are, where we are, how we're doing, how we're not doing, what we're going to involve ourselves with versus what we're not going to involve ourselves with. We have to be honest about this stuff now. As they said, it done got real out here, y'all. It's really real out here. As I look up and down the streets of Los Angeles from where I live, and I see all these folks, some of them I know have legions of spirits in them. The government calls it, and I almost feel like crying, I'm not going to lie, the government calls it mental illness. Some call it drugs. But these are spirits in these people. And I see vessels, human bodies that look like they've just been taken over. They've just been completely taken over. I don't even know if the Most High's Ruach is still in these folks. They have been taken over. And it's saddening. The conditions that some of them live in, the things that they accept. We've got to call some stuff out. In order to fight, we have to be honest about whether or not we're living right. And we have to fight. Don't get caught up on flattery and compliments. Don't get caught up on that. That's a trick of the enemy. It's one of the quickest tricks of the enemy to try to bring you down. Don't get caught up on money. Don't do it. I saw a lot of that in my own family. Don't get caught up with that. Don't get caught up with that. That's a trick. Be mindful of your agreements, your contracts, whether they be written and or verbal. Even your business handshakes, what we used to call gentlemen's agreements. When you agree to something and then you shake on it, be mindful. And if you question whether or not you have agreed to something that you should not have, you put that before the Most High. You ask the Most High to eradicate that agreement. Don't allow it to stand. Ask him to help you to fight in whatever way to make sure that that agreement, if you mistakenly went into one, is annulled and destroyed. You talk to the Most High about that. Let him do what he does. But do not, under any circumstances, move too quickly to make an agreement with anybody about anything. When you're not sure, be still. Something that the Most High gave me some years ago, and I still have it because he gave it to me. This is what he put in my spirit, I believe. When in doubt, do without. You can quote that, and it comes from the Most High. When in doubt, do without. Leave it alone when you doubt it. Just don't even go into it. So be mindful of your agreements, because your agreements are binding. So study yourself. Study yourself. Study yourself. So that your study of the Word, and I'm talking to myself too, so that your study of the Word is solid and concrete. Study yourself so that your dealings with the Most High's people, your dealings are solid and your dealings are righteous. Study yourself so that your outcomes are favorable, all based on what the Most High has already predetermined, preordained for your life. In Yahushua's name, no weapon that's formed against us shall prosper. Allah Yahuwah, so be it, so it is.